wind over hills and exposed coasts.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick.
Yeah, I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Very shortly, my comedy guests Simon Fanshawe, Stephen Grant and myself will be going through tomorrow morning's newspapers to see what we have in store for us. But in the meantime, here are the news headlines tonight.
Thanks, Simon. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Foreign Secretary says death sentences handed to two British men captured whilst fighting in Ukraine are a sham judgment with no legitimacy. Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner have been accused of mercenary activities by pro-Russian rebels in a court in Donetsk. A Moroccan national was also sentenced to death. Boris Johnson's spokesperson says prisoners of war are entitled to combatant immunity. Aidan Aslin is a former constituent of MP Robert Jenrick. Speaking in the Commons, he called for their release.
I hope that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, will summon the Russian ambassador to the Foreign Office at her earliest convenience to convey a clear message that you cannot treat British citizens in this manner, and both Aidan and Sean should be freed and returned to their family and friends either in Ukraine or home here to the United Kingdom as soon as practicable.
The leader of the opposition and the shadow Northern Ireland secretary will announce tomorrow that a Labour government would protect the Good Friday Agreement. Sir Keir Starmer will complete a series of meetings with leaders of political parties. He's set to deliver a message that Labour would prioritise Northern Ireland and treat all parties and communities with mutual respect if they came to power. The Prime Minister says nobody should be locked out of home ownership because of where they live or where they were born. Speaking in Blackpool, Boris Johnson announced plans to extend the right to buy scheme to housing association tenants. He says that 2.5 million homes that are part of associations leave people trapped because they can't buy. He argued housing benefits could go towards helping people secure mortgages.
We will finish the right to own reforms Margaret Thatcher began in the 1980s, ending the absurd position where first-time buyers spend their life savings on flats only to find themselves being charged hundreds of pounds for painting their own doors or even unable to own a dog. That's what being on your side is all about.
To the US now, and at least 3 people have been killed in a shooting incident in the state of Maryland. Local media reports the suspected shooter opened fire inside a factory in the town of Smithsburg. There was no immediate word on a possible motive. Aerial footage showed police at the scene. The sheriff's office says the suspect is no longer a threat. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Simon and the rest of the headliners.
Thank you, Ray. Hello again. Welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, we have fellow Brightonians Stephen Grant and Simon Fanshawe. Fellows of one another and fellows of me too. So this is a small Me Too meeting in a way.
There's 3 men in a sinking boat. Really.
Yeah. Well, come on, let's give our newly founded city a little bit more of optimism than that. Very nice to see you both, gentlemen. And Stephen, I think this is our first time together on this particular show.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Simon.
We've been on a few stages together over the years, you and I.
Many places in many ways, but never this. So
we started out pretty much almost in the same month, I think. I think one of my 3rd or 4th open mic gigs, you were on the bill as well in Oval. Do you remember that one?
I remember you doing a topical joke about the Spice Girls' first song, which really genuinely dates how long we've been doing this.
I know, it lasted a good 6 months.
So that would have been in the...
96.
96,
something
yes.
like that.
Well,
yeah.
yes. Well.
If you want to be my lover, you've got to get with my friends. Correct me if I'm wrong,
can I just
but
say...
that has always been an absolute deal breaker for most of the women I've known. That was the joke. So
that was a good laugh.
Always good laugh.
I just wanted to make the point that I started in 1981, so I'm very, very old, and I'm going to shout my age out at the bus stop.
You won the Perrier in about 96, wasn't it?
89.
89, God.
89.
You were on the decline already before we even picked up.
And I gave up. I stopped before you started.
You got out of the top.
This is like being on the Muppets. You're like Statler and Waldorf, you two.
Or what was the Eamon Andrews one? This Is Your Life, and you haven't seen him since 1989.
That's right. This was your life.
Your most feared compare.
Best joke was Woody Allen. Yes, he thought he was drowning. He saw his life pass before him, then he realised it was somebody else's life. It's brilliant.
We have to get on with our show. We have the front pages to look at. Let's start with the Daily Mail, which has UK outrage as 2 Brits face firing squad. We will be covering that story very shortly. The Daily Telegraph also have the same story. Captured British fighters sentenced to death, and a picture of them there looking understandably forlorn behind the bars. The Independent face the same lead story. Britons face execution after Russian show trial. A picture of them there in what I suppose, under the circumstances, you could legitimately call happier days. Sean Pinner and Aidan Aslin there. The Guardian have low-paid care workers can't afford petrol to get to work. I don't think they're the only ones, to be honest, at this stage. There is also a photograph for the Soviet-era show trial. The Financial Times have Sunak lost £11 billion of taxpayer cash in debt blunder, say economists. And a photograph of the sham trial. And also Palantir poaches senior NHS staff as part of a bid to clinch a £360 million contract. The Daily Mirror have a photograph of Prince William, who has been caught undercover flogging the Big Issue, which is a bit much, to be honest, snatching bread and meat out of the mouths of the homeless. But there we are. I suppose he's got to have something to fill his afternoons. And sentenced to death by Putin. That story clearly dominating the front pages. The Daily Express as well. With a photograph of them in the trench. Millions given chance to buy own home. The Daily Express is the only newspaper which seems to be leading with the Boris Johnson PR exercise. And he's a Prince William spotted selling Big Issue. And finally, The Sun. Just like Mum Diana, that is cleverly placed next to a woman who clearly is nothing like Mum Diana. That would be Kelly Brook, I believe, and it relates instead to William, whose mum was, of course, very charitable in her endeavours to help the homeless too. So those are the front pages. Let's have a look and see what's inside. So we begin with the front page of Friday's Mirror and most of the other papers as well. News of sentencing of British fighters in Ukraine. Simon, you have this.
Well, the headline is Brit fighters captured in Ukraine sentenced to death by Russian-backed court. You just heard the story on the news and you just recapped it there from all the headlines. I would only say one thing about this story is that you're either against the death penalty or you're for it. I've always instinctively known I was against it, and for a long time I couldn't work out why. And then one day I saw Sister Helen Prejean on the television. Did you ever see the film Dead Man Walking? That's Sister Helen Prejean, and she wrote a book called Dead Man Walking, and she said something amazing in the book. She said, a person is not just the worst thing they ever did. And I thought, that's compassion. If somebody's got the potential to change, we should never dispense with their life. So for me, it's an issue of absolute principle. So I would only say in this, if you've ever thought you were in favour of the death penalty, this is the moment when you're tested, because this is the moment when you realise that actually the death penalty is absolutely beyond the bounds of acceptability.
I suppose there is something, whether it's a political or a philosophical point, to distinguish between how people might be treated in a court of law when you're in the midst of a war as well. I mean, and the details of what they've done and so on, it would seem to me that this is a continuation of war in a sense. Do you know what I mean, Stephen?
Yes, and the kind of even... I totally follow what Simon is saying as well, but I don't even think there's an argument that that even if you had a working legal system with a death penalty at the end of it, that this qualifies as such.
No.
It's not an internationally recognised court.
No.
They aren't being treated as prisoners of war because they're not being recognised as members of the Ukraine military.
No.
And they were tried as effectively terrorists by virtue of being foreign people in a land that they don't recognise as being their own, even though they've been living in Ukraine. So, I mean,
which, I mean, to be fair, in my lifetime, that was a controversy between the Northern Irish, the Bobby Sands and so on in the Maze prison and Mrs Thatcher's government, who refused to acknowledge what the Irish felt was their legitimate status.
State of war.
State of war. But it's I wouldn't want to try and make any equivocation with that. I just wonder, and perhaps possibly I'm entering into the realm of magical thinking, whether there may be some attempt to this is like a gambit, and then there will be a negotiation.
And I think you have to look to the fact that this comes on the back of literally a few days ago, Ukraine and the Russian Federation swapping prisoners of war. Well, to some extent, more they've been swapping and repatriating bodies, which shows there is a level of correspondence going on between both sides. Whether that is, whether that is friendly or not is probably unlikely. But it does show that if you basically play your strongest hand at the beginning, which is a death penalty, I imagine there will be some horse trading to follow with their lives.
I imagine they're very keen that Boris Johnson doesn't get involved in the negotiations.
Let's hope his negotiating abilities are a lot better than it was with Nasreen.
Friday's Guardian next, one of the hot topic issues of the day. This is property ownership, and the Express, of course, led with it as well. Are the Tories on the right track with this policy, Stephen? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the first question is this actually a new policy? This is effectively a relaunch of the right to buy scheme. And Michael Gove has announced that Boris Johnson will announce, effectively tomorrow, so Thursday, that people will be allowed to purchase their own homes using housing benefit as part of their income.
So this would have to be a house that they're in and using housing benefit to pay the rent on, and it's social housing, is it?
It's social housing. Actually, I haven't seen the...
No, I think it's both. I think there are two sides to this. One is housing associations, which is social housing. But as far as I can read it, there seems to be an idea that any house that you want to buy...
Yes, it does. You don't have to be in it, so to speak. This is a house that is going to be made available.
But you wouldn't be able to force the owner to sell to you, would you?
No. The issue about social housing, I think, is that when Margaret Thatcher offered the right to buy, the problem with it was not necessarily the right to buy, because the idea was that it was one for one, so you replaced it. It was the discounts. So what they're saying here is it's going to cost £3 billion a year. But actually, by the way, we're not going to do that. We'll do a couple of pilot schemes in the Midlands, and actually it'll be capped within existing expenditure. In other words, it's PR. It's PR.
And did you say, Simon, you have some experience with housing associations and so on?
I'm a chairman of a housing association called Hexagon, which is in the 5 boroughs in South East London.
Would it help if people were able to buy more of these places, or is that not the point?
No, the point about it is that a lot of people, even if using benefit, and you make the point that you can't, it still doesn't give you the deposit.
Well, this is the problem. They say you can use your housing benefit. There's two issues here. The first one is they still go to commercial lenders who are being told to accept that as income. But the reality is you don't get housing benefit if you have you don't get universal credit unless you've got savings over £16,000.
Exactly, it's a perfect catch-22.
Which is the deposit you require in order to buy a home. So I don't know who's going to qualify.
And the daft thing about doing it in social housing is that there's a very simple calculation how housing associations work. We own properties which people live in, their homes. We manage their homes for them, and on the basis of that asset, we borrow. And in order to build new homes, and then the idea is we let them out at social rent so they're cheap, housing benefit is less, and so on and so forth. If you start selling off the asset, you can raise less money, which means you can build less homes.
Opportunities of housing associations to function.
Yeah, and they keep on saying it's one replaced to one, but that never ever happened before.
No,
that is the red line.
It usually, the suspicion is that Tory governments use this kind of policy to actually diminish the status of and the availability of social.
And you might remember way back when in Westminster, of course, there was a famous case in which actually it was used to gerrymander the result on the basis that the more people who bought their homes lived in a particular area, the more they would vote Conservative.
The first place I ever lived in, I was just renting, or in fact, to be honest, sofa surfing in a friend's flat, but his father had bought it. He bought in a place called Osprey Heights. It was in Battersea near Clapham Junction. It was part of Wandsworth, and it had basically been bought by some developers from the council. The council had essentially evicted all the tenants on the premise that there was some dangerous amount of asbestos in the building. This was the rumour anyway that went around. And then once they were out, they fixed it up and flogged it to these developers. Absolutely
dangerous amount of collateral there. Can I just also point out, as three Sussex residents right now, the idea of taking housing benefit, timesing it by 3.5 and allowing yourself to buy a property with it seems almost non-existent.
Yes, I was going to say, you'd be very lucky to get a dog kennel somewhere out to the west of the city at the moment.
Maybe they're going to terraform Lincolnshire or something. I don't know. Friday's Times now, and Labour are taking the side of the workers in this upcoming rail strike.
Well, to be fair to Labour, it says, yes, drivers on 3 more lines join rail strikes. So they're company by company by company, they're picking up the rail strikes, and it's going to happen sometime between, I think, the 21st and the 26th of June. Well, Labour's trying to ride both horses at once, actually. It's trying to say we're on the side of the workers because they actually haven't had a pay rise since 2019 and therefore they haven't kept up with inflation. But also, by the way, we're on the side of the passengers. But always, there are two things that always happen in these strikes. One is that trade unions have barons and rail companies, handsome profits, all very attractive. Their profits are all very brill-creamed and, rather well-shaved. And but the other thing is that really annoys me is this idea that, because I'm a rail traveller, I don't have a car, I've never had a car. I can drive, but I never have a car. And they say, the rail unions say, we're punishing the rail companies. You go, no, you're not. And it's like those sketches, do you remember in the silent movies where somebody swings a plank and you duck and I hit Simon in the face with a plank? Yeah. It's always us. It's always the damn passengers.
Well, I mean, we really must resist going on a Southern Rail rant because that could take up the rest of the programme for
But I once said, there was a picket outside the station once, and I went up to the picket and I said to the chap, I said, hello. I said, genuinely, I'd quite like to know, what you're on strike for. He said, well, talk to him. He said, point at this other bloke. I went, well, he's talking to somebody else, and I'd quite like to ask you. I said, you've got official picket. He says, you deaf? He's going to... And you thought, he really hasn't got much interest in winning me round to his case.
I've had a couple of conversations
really
with Southern Rail employees just at Hoe Station about, and honestly trying to start off quite polite, and they seek or said, what is your take on this, Stephen? I mean, you're a reasonably sort of union-friendly individual, aren't you?
I am, and I sympathise with the absolute core level behind the strike, which is the fact that their earnings have not been linked. And I know there are a lot of people out there going, well, hang on a second, a lot of people are in financial dire straits right now. Why should that be any...
Train drivers earn as much as 70 grand a year.
Well, I mean, yes, I'm not going to look at the specifics of how much they earn and then say but that has been frozen. The issue I have is that I don't think their mechanism for actually getting their point across, getting what they want to achieve, actually works anymore. And also, I have a slight issue with the RMT as a union. You remember, this is a pro-Brexit union. They do have a very strong sense of our way or the highway.
Okay.
And I don't...
they're the drivers' union, right?
The drivers...
ASLEF is more like the
actual rail workers. And you have I think Tessa or something like that, who actually are the station master.
I think they call that,
and the ones who work in the actual... There's 3 separate unions that cover it, and they're all working together. It's nationwide, so this is very much coordinated, so they very much feel strongly about this. However, I don't think their approach is targeting the right people.
And they need one thing, and I hate to say it, but I do agree with Boris Johnson on this. There are antiquated notions of how to run and where to employ people.
Well, it's worth pointing out in that respect that there are 2 issues here. RMT are claiming that it's a pay issue, I think, and ASLEF are claiming that it's an issue about the fact that their jobs.
It's an existential crisis.
So it's so it is guardless trains and so on and so forth. But I remember one of the people saying to me, well, the thing is, it's only the guard who can look out and see along the train. Actually, in Brighton, the platform very slightly curves. So, in fact, that is actually not true.
Einsteinian physics is the end of ASLEF.
Yes, the camera would be more able to see that.
So long as the entire journey involves a 2-degree turn to the right.
I've always found, I was looking at their name today, ASLEF, and thinking, why do I feel warmly inclined towards this issue? I've realised it's because it's a cross between Aslan and Gandalf. And so they've managed to circumvent my natural hostility to union. Anyway, listen, we must move on. Friday's Independent next. Prince William has got a new job, Stephen.
Yes, Prince William has been spotted selling the big issue. He's not been turfed out post... You know, he's not been told, along with Andrew, to sling his hook. He's very much still in the good books. But no, a member of the public spotted him.
Eventually.
That's right, yes.
It does feel a bit like that.
Despite our ability to look over these people.
Hello!
Yeah, there he was.
Prince here!
Selling the big issue, and went over to sort of have a close look, realised it was Prince William, had a chat with him, said he was, again, it wasn't something that had been highly publicised. The reason why it came to people's notice is because I think his brother-in-law then put it up on LinkedIn, which I think, if you know, the LinkedIn social network is the biggest news they've had for the best part.
Is that how Big Issue recruit these days?
I just think it's
slightly
I like the idea of the fact that the kind of homeless news has been spread across a workers' network, but
I'd find Prince Harry more credible, wouldn't you, as a Big Issue seller? He's ex-military.
Yes, I suppose you would do, but it did slightly come over to me, darling, what would happen if we got thrown out of all 3 houses?
Yeah.
You know, I'd be on the street selling Tatler.
Wouldn't you say Prince William, he's a very well-presented man. I can't imagine he looks like a proper... I don't mean...
No, I tell you how it happened. How it happened was apparently the guy who spotted him is an ex-policeman, and what he actually spotted first was the covert surveillance operation.
Oh, nice.
And he thought, I wonder what's happening, and then he went and he saw it was Prince William.
That's what we always think I'm doing. I'm just poking it back in.
The funny thing is apparently he went and chatted with Prince William. He was very polite, and then Prince William afterwards said, "Can I sell a big issue to you?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm sorry, I don't have any change on me." And then Prince William whipped out a card reader.
Oh, fantastic!
Whipped out a card reader. That's what I like.
I think it's really good, isn't it?
The digitally connected homeless.
Well, they have going to have those soon, and I have been approached by a beggar with a card reader on the train. They have, well, I say beggar, but they're selling the tissues, but it's essentially it's like glorified.
But also,
buskers. But they had card readers.
Buskers have got card readers, QRs. It's brilliant. I love all that.
Well, my wallet was stolen over the weekend. It's OK, it's fine. I had a bit of cash stolen, but my cards went. Of course, you immediately just phone them up and catch them. Fine.
I imagine the wallet was very expensive.
The wallet was not expensive at all. It had 2 very valuable John Lewis gift cards in there, which I'd got a refund onto, and they have gone now. That's annoying. However,
I'm sure there's somebody from John Lewis watching.
Whoever nicked my wallet, if they watch this show, they'll never go, oh, that's what they are. They can go and spend those. And
2 John Lewis.
They're bearer of bonds.
The first one gets lost.
Yes. Anyway, listen, the point is, when you lose your cards, you realise London is no longer... You can't get around with cash. I've got plenty of cash, but I cannot... I have literally been unable to buy a round in a pub, had to come back out and ask to borrow a friend's card and buy his card off him for 5 minutes. There are pubs now that
That's the best wallet fumble I've heard in a long while. Terribly sorry, lost my wallet. Oh, dear, I haven't got any cards.
But you got cash. You would think that was, you know, you cannot go on the... If you try and travel on TfL with cash, you're absolutely scuppered. You might as well be a beggar.
Well, can I suggest you go to...
You've got to have cash sticking out of all your pockets like a good old-fashioned millionaire.
Do you think we're not far off homeless people coming up to us, asking for money, us handing them cash and saying, well, what can I do with this?
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. On to Friday's Express, and I think this will be the last story of the first section. The PGA Tour isn't happy with some of its players.
Well, the PGA Tour has banned huge stars of the game after they switched to Saudi LIV Golf. Furious statement out of it.
Yeah.
I read this and I thought, fantastic, this is really terrific. PGA are, you know, protesting against the fact that the Saudis are, you know, well known for their abuses of human... No.
Yes.
No, there's nothing to do with this. This is a family squabble.
Yeah.
This is basically, you go and play with them, you can't come to my party. Basically, they're saying, if you play on that one, you can't play on ours, and that's the end of it, which I find extraordinary. The LIV, this Saudi golf tournament, the winner gets $4 million. $4 million.
That's not bad.
I don't play golf. It seems to be a stupid
And it won't
game.
be winner takes all either. There will be substantial prizes.
Oh, 120k is the smallest prize for the person who comes up. But I did just by way of jolliness look up golf terms, so I thought you might like to know them. That my favourite are albatross, burdo, bogey, mulligan, skinny chunk, flop shot, snowman, waggle, and a shank. So, you know, it sounds like the Kama Sutra. And then I looked up rowing, because that is the most sexually ambiguous sport ever in terms of its thing. And, of course, it's cocks, it's crabs, front stop, rigger, jigger and spoon.
But very little money in it, despite that extraordinarily fruitful
Well, you can catch a crab, though. That's the point, Simon, you know.
Do you have any views on golf and the money-grubbing element?
Well, I mean, it's sort of connected to the story, but not entirely having an opinion on it. I'm just pleased you said LIV. I mean, spending the whole day seeing that, wondering whether it was LIV,
Oldman,
or whether it was 54.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it was Roman numerals. And I didn't see the previous 53 Saudi golf
Saudi
tournaments.
Arabia, it's the home of Arabic numerals.
It's not going to be Roman numerals.
I don't see you as a I didn't see you as a public school boy. I studied Latin as a young man.
I adore Roman numerals, but I did do Latin, actually, but I did go to public school. I was one of that very thin band of people who did it at comprehensive.
Wow.
But we have to move on, folks.
What is 97?
On the bombshell that golf is all about the money. That's it for part one. Coming up, we'll be discussing working class aspirations, TikTok's toxic work culture. That's a nice one. And good old-fashioned Chinese espionage. See you after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliner, South Coast edition with me, Simon Evans, Stephen Grant and Simon Fanshawe. Friday's Telegraph now as we move into the mid-range whimsy section of the show. Apparently the working class shouldn't be setting their ambitions too high.
You've pretty much summarised the story there,
Yes.
Simon, to be honest with you. Catherine Burble-Singh, who is the chairman of the Social Mobility Commission,
Yes.
who has caused...
And headmistress, of course, we should say, of the very famous school.
That's the thing. She has been given that sort of job of overseeing social mobility.
Yeah.
And one of her initial speech is going to basically say, rein in your ambitions on social mobility.
Yeah.
Basically, she's saying that working class people should aim lower than Oxbridge. In other words, she's saying, don't judge me by getting people who are from unemployed families with no education to come out with first degrees from Oxford. It's not going to happen.
No, I think that's reasonable, but of course it's all about the messaging to some extent, isn't it? And judging the tone just right. I think I heard you saying, Simon, that you felt a little bit kind of grated by it.
I do. She has a kind of political Tourette's, really, isn't she? She's brilliant in some moments, and other moments she says something like this, and I just don't think it comes over right. I completely understand what she's trying to say, that actually, you know, that what's that phrase, the good is the enemy, best is the enemy of the best.
The perfect is the enemy of the good. Yes, very
so
good.
to some extent, I get that.
That is exactly it, actually.
And I get what she's saying, and that's absolutely fine. Not everybody wants to be president or CEO. I get that. And it's stupid to tell all of us, I don't want to be CEO. But what I do feel is that there's a slightly patronising and well done, you know, you got out of the puddle.
I wonder whether
and I
it
don't
is,
think that's reasonable, really.
The one thing that I noticed, an immediate red flag for me, and this is something my father taught me to immediately distrust, was it is expected to say. This is a speech she's going to give. She's expected to say, and I just wonder whether, a little bit like when the new guy comes into the BBC and he's expected to lambaste political correctness or something, and then you actually see it and it's a tiny... It's just something... What I suspect she's actually doing is she's managing expectations across the group, across the class. She's saying, of maybe 50,000 young men and women who have emerged from socio-economic disadvantage this year, you cannot legitimately all expect to get into Oxford. Let's not throw up our hands in horror if only a few do, but others get into the rust.
But that can also be an excuse for the fact that actually no one's moving. And there's a really good piece...
That's my problem with it. My problem with it is that she's redefining the parameters of what's considered a success in her role.
And the class is really, really significant.
Is she redefining them, or is she asserting a possible...
No, I think she's lowering the expectations because there's no real movement. There's a really interesting piece of work called The Class Ceiling by Sam Friedman
not
and
like the cotton ceiling.
Daniel Lewis. No, not like that. The Class Ceiling. And this is a project that's run out of the London School of Economics, and they wrote a book and series of papers. And one of the things that they show is that in the elite professions, so that's the top of civil service and you know, lawyers and accountants and all that, if you come from a working class background, you will earn £6,200 less a year, no matter what level of achievement that you make. And there is an absolute penalty from coming from working class backgrounds.
That's not very large. That's not bad. You're probably earning 150 grand a year.
Yes, but the point is your peer, your exact peer, who comes from middle class, is earning a £6.5 grand more. And you know
that feels all right to me. I mean,
no, Simon, no, that's not a joke. This is that you are being penalised.
No, seriously, Simon, I'm dead serious. If it's literally down to 6k difference, regardless of your background.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, it's not regardless of your background. If you're working class background, then it's 6k.
That's the degree of
but the point is that is true right the way across the elite professions. Not only do you earn less, you're less likely to achieve the highest grades. There is an absolute class penalty. People like me simply have an advantage in those professions, and it persists. Doesn't matter how clever you are.
I absolutely admire you for centering yourself as a member of the elite. Anyway,
people sound very middle class, but Simon, as you know, I'm upper.
You are upper.
Middle
Kingdom
class.
of Fife.
Thank you.
Stephen, do you want to check in one last thing on this before we go?
Yeah, I think the reality of it is that everybody should set higher parameters. I think she will be measured on the success in where she has those ringing endorsements of people who did go to those top levels, and I think she's made life harder for herself in the long run.
She does seem to be able to do that, but let's, as you say, judge her on results at the end of the day. Friday's Times, and a story that the three of us are absolutely best placed to discuss. This is the inner workings of TikTok.
TikTok?
I mean, I rarely spend my days, without a dip.
I rarely spend my days with a dip. This guy called Joshua Marr, TikTok boss, questions maternity leave. He said to his staff that he thought women should not be allowed to have maternity leave. And but what's quite fun about this is that, having said that, The company has now put out a press release explaining that he's now taking some time off. So it appears that what is not good for the goose appears to be rather good for the gander.
Can I ask, is it Joshua Ma? It's an interesting name. It feels like it's a multicultural, or what I would say, multi.
He is a Chinese person.
Is he coming from a Chinese?
He is.
Work ethic. Because I mean, it's no secret, is it, that the Chinese regard things like holidays and toilet breaks as being sort of Western decadence?
Yes. Well, I don't know about that, and I don't know about Chinese culture. But the point is that he has said that taking time off, and that there's an allegation. These are allegations made by disgruntled employees who feel that they've been under a really nasty culture in which they've had to work, where they've had to expect it to get up early in the morning and then stay on until China goes to bed and all this kind of stuff.
It's so hard to get it right, isn't it? Because I remember seeing some sort of videos for people who work for other Silicon Valley operations where they all live in an enormous house with a swimming pool.
Oh, that's right, and there are billiard tables and cushions on the floor. The thing that does make me laugh is that the companies always do this when these things happen. They blow up and they put out an email which is headlined, "Maintaining a Positive Working Culture." And it always reminds me of those South African laws. There was the extension of black education was always about denying education to black people.
Separate but equal maternity rights.
Exactly.
Friday's Mail and Chinese espionage now. This is the new Cold War, Stephen.
Yes, I didn't get TikTok, did I? I got actual espionage.
Yeah.
So
We're getting to zip through these a little bit, but
I imagine the lines are more blurred than most people realise, but the reality of it is that there are Chinese cultural organisations that have had relationships with universities, both in here and in the US and around the rest of Europe, that are slowly but surely being extricated from the syllabus, effectively. What it is there's an amendment to the Higher Education Bill coming out, and what it's going to be is to try and remove the Confucius Institute. That is a Chinese state-sponsored programme to kind of educate people about Mandarin and the culture, and effectively, but at the same time, there is a belief, as a strong belief, and is a cross-party belief as well, that what they're doing is a small amount of propaganda to see
I'm
people.
sure it is the British Council or Council. Is it Council or Council? I can remember the overseas sort of
British Council.
That's British propaganda, isn't it? To an extent.
Well, I mean, people look at the World Service and think it is a form of propaganda. But effectively, they are.
We have soft power. You have propaganda. They are undermining local values.
And we're broadening the horizons of people across the planet. Yeah, absolutely. But yes, this is what's happened. It's been removed from Sweden already. It's in the process, and it's almost been entirely eradicated by Mike Pompeo, I believe, in the US over the last few years, from 100 institutions down to 4, and it's starting to happen here as well. And some people think it's long overdue.
And I took the opportunity, because it's the Confucius Institute, to look up some Confucian quotes, and I was thinking
from the Analects.
There's a story at the moment around saying, there's a suggestion that Boris Johnson, as a result of the 40% vote against him, will purge cabinet members and who didn't vote for him. And Confucius once said, "Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves."
Very famous quote. Possibly his only good quote, considering how wise he's supposed to be. I've gone through his Goodreads page, and I don't think he's all that.
Faced with what is right, to leave it undone shows a lack of courage. Good. Fine words and insinuating appearance are seldom associated with true virtue. He could be a whole chapter of quotes for Boris Johnson.
He basically founded the Chinese civil service. He's not quite as wide-ranging as
Machiavelli or whatever.
Yes.
Friday's on a Wednesday.
That's
what I love about this show. He's such a font of knowledge, you know.
Font, you said, yeah? Font, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to catch you right. Friday's Mail, and is Thailand about to become the new Amsterdam? Who's got this? Simon.
So, this is me. Living the high life, says the Daily Mail. Thailand legalises growing and selling marijuana, but bans recreational use as 4,000 prisoners serving time for weed-related drug crimes are released. My absolute favourite thing about this is a Daily Mail headline with the word weed in it, meaning marijuana. And I can imagine all these people and their breakfast. Weed? I don't think so. The basic thing is, it's absolutely fabulous, this. They have effectively legalised the private and at-home consumption of marijuana, and they're legal. So you can't go out and deal it, I don't think, but you can buy it in shops and Amsterdam and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is that, and then they released 4,000 people who'd been in prison for various weed-related offences.
In The Little Mermaid, when all the lost souls are released from the... Yeah, do you know what I mean? And just like float... It must have been an absolutely joyful scene.
But one does have to remember that thing is, you know, whilst this appears to be kind of massively liberal, sort of liberalising gesture, you do have to remember that last year alone there were 1,500 1,500 protests in Thailand on against free speech and the incarceration of political prisoners. And there are 1,500 political prisoners who were tried last year alone.
What do you think, Stephen, about marijuana?
I think
Exhibit A.
The thing about this is Exhibit A is a Class B drug. Like all of these decisions, there's always an economic basis behind it.
Yeah.
And I think the strong economic basis here is the fact that those 4,000 people who were released are effectively part of a business that Thailand needs.
Yeah.
Both its agriculture and its tourism has been decimated by the pandemic in recent times. And actually, marijuana is something that really helps both of those sectors. Agriculture and tourism. Because yes,
and
it's not only private consumption, but it will be available for tourists to purchase.
And it tends to then cascade into people eating out as well?
Yeah, yes, all hours, to be honest with you. I imagine the petrol stations of Bangkok will suddenly find empty shells of late-night snacks.
You'll be glad to know that some of the buds of various names like sugarcane, bubblegum, purple Afghani and UFO.
Nice, UFO. We used to get those in the disco. I am slightly baffled as to what the present law is in London, to be honest. Just walking around Hyde Park Corner today, the stench of high powder, I don't know if it's skunk or whether there's some new strain I don't know about, but you walk from one cloud of the stuff to the next.
You're a parent. I think it's the very least you could do is learn the law, Simon.
I'm just saying it doesn't seem to be very... I do know what the law is. I'm being ironic, but I don't think it's being very well imposed.
I think it's so prevalent. I think it's so prevalent, really. I mean, realistically, it's the speeding of sort of personal law breaking.
Well, except that nobody makes money out of speeding, but the government could be making a lot of revenue, I think.
I think there are a lot of Western nations who'll be looking at what happens in Thailand from an economic perspective with very beady eyes.
It could be the liberalisation we all dreamed of as teenagers. Part 2 is at an end. Fear not, coming up in the home straight, we've got prisoners on podcast, love potions and erotic Swedish bins. BINS. We'll see you there in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Stephen Grant and Simon Fanshawe. We are on the home straight, gentlemen, and an amazing story from Friday's Guardian. Now this reads like the movie The Fugitive, rewritten by the Coronation Street writing desk. Who's got this one? Simon, you have it. Yeah.
Prisoner on the run for 3 weeks appears on Birmingham podcast, is the headline. This guy, Gregor Gray, rang up a podcast, having escaped from this prison, and said that the thing with prison was that it was causing him heartache. And he was driving him insane, and that he wanted to talk about this. There are two things about this story. One is that you think, well, he sounds rather sweet in a funny sort of way, because what he said on the podcast was he's going to plan to return to prison before his next parole hearing on the 14th of June. You think, well, good luck with that, Greg. I don't think they're going to be that sympathetic. But the peculiar thing about this is that there's something called imprisonment for public protection, IPP sentences, which were introduced and then fairly swiftly banned. And what they are is that this guy was given 4 years for robbery. He's now served 17. IPPs enabled the prison system to extend your sentence
because they don't think he's safe. They don't.
Well, that's
safe to be amongst the public.
Safe to be amongst the public. But so therefore, whilst I say he sounds quite sweet, you then do have to say to yourself, well, why has his sentence gone on being extended to the extent that it's 17 years?
The psycho who helps the fella change his wheel and then chucks a brick at him. Do you remember that?
Yes, but the point is that so I think, I mean, they've been repealed, but not retrospectively.
Yeah.
So this guy, I mean, 17 years for a sentence that you had for 4. I mean, surely is the prison service so terrible that actually you can't rehabilitate somebody who's in there for burglary and robbery? That's something that breaks my heart.
Stephen, what would you do if you found you had an escaped criminal?
I was going to say I would absolutely get them onto the podcast. I mean, I think this Birmingham podcast is punching the air, to be honest with you.
It's called the Chop Shop.
We're all looking for a niche, aren't we, or something to stick us.
Absolutely, and if anybody out there is on the run and is also a keen cyclist, then my podcast would absolutely be the natural home for you.
Steve McQueen escaped from Stalag.
So long as he was doing it on a mountain bike rather than on an actual powered vehicle,
I'm starting a podcast in the autumn called The Power of Difference, named after my book, and he could come on that as well.
Fantastic.
So, you know.
We maybe really should, because he is obviously quite different.
He is quite different. I rather love him.
Friday's Telegraph and the BBC are going to single-handedly demolish echo chambers, Stephen.
This is a brilliant story. You know me, this is the sort of thing that I absolutely get my teeth into. We could lose all our time talking about it, so I'll try and summarise. The reality of it is that, as you all know, the world of cookies and tracking means that if you start showing interest in things on the internet, you are presented with more of it. The computers learn what you like and present you with those adverts, etc., etc. It is causing echo chambers, not just in our conscious actions, but in our unconscious actions. And what the BBC has done is come up with an ethical artificial intelligence. And that is, what it's doing is it knows what you read, and it now starts inserting news stories that you wouldn't otherwise look at to try and break you out of your comfort zone. The issue with it is first and foremost, will people want to do that? You know. Secondly, is that the BBC's remit anymore? They've had their budget pretty much heavily slashed, and they can't afford tech people anymore. That's the other thing. The people who know the tech, who understand this tech, are being paid big bucks all the way around the world. The BBC is struggling to get this technology in. So will it happen? I'm not sure. Will people want it? I'm not sure, but it is the right sort of thing to be doing, because we're all getting narrower and narrower.
Yeah, you're right. I have two issues with it. One is that it's being spearheaded by a woman called Storm Fagan. Now, I don't know, but that just sounds like a made-up name to me. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I am not sure she's not an AI creation herself.
Sounds like she's been rescued from an island, I'll be honest with you.
Incredible. But what I am genuinely more seriously worried about is that the BBC, without any shadow of a doubt, you may well want to push back on this, but to my mind, they have an agenda too, and it is so easy to say to people, oh, we're bringing you out of your bubble, and instead we'd like you to become aware of this and this and this. And we all know the sort of thing that the BBC likes to draw attention to, and it might not be what you want to read or watch, right?
OK, a couple of things about this. One is that one of the balances they're looking for is in London, out of London. So they are trying to spread the thing regionally. I think by and large it's a good idea, but there's an important thing to remember. I think Matthew Syed makes this point in his book Rebel Ideas. He talks about the difference between echo chambers and information bubbles. So information bubbles are a cult, and what cults do is they absolutely hermetically seal, and there are penalties for leaving. The light cannot shine in. You know, Tom Waits, you know, The Gap and all. The light cannot shine in because that's, of course, what breaks the carapace. People leave. But what's interesting about information bubbles is, and what Matthew uncovered in this couple, there were two bits of research, one from Pew and one from Oxford. And what was interesting about it was that in information bubbles, the argument used to be that you never encountered other opinions. What is actually increasingly clear is that you do encounter other opinions, but here's the contrary thing. Encountering opinions that you do not have reinforce the opinions that you do have. So the more you hear opposing opinions, the more you believe your own.
Because
that's
it will
more
be a
true of
tribal reinforcement.
It's more true of people on the right than the left, but it's nonetheless true on both sides.
It is artificial intelligence, on the whole, does not have an agenda. I would just like to point that out. And reality is, it's just as likely to show you something about cricket because all you look at.
But Stephen, it does have an agenda in the sense that I understand what you mean about machine learning, but It depends on the data set that you start with and the biases that may or may not be in there. So, for instance, if you look at Siri, for instance, when Siri started, Siri didn't know what rape was, but she did know what Viagra was.
Friday's Metro now, and forget Orwell's 1984. It seems Huxley's Brave New World was a more accurate depiction of the future, Simon. This is sex drugs.
This is a hideous story.
Oh, come on.
MDMA love potions could be available within a decade, experts say. And this anthropologist, Dr. Anna Machin of Oxford University, if that gives her any kind of credibility, talks about the idea that, you know, this could help you to fall in love if your relationship is going into difficulty. This is the most appalling thing to think, that we should be wasting energy on giving people false ways of falling in love with each other. The only thing that human beings have in common is that we're all different, and the only great joy we have is trying to discover that difference without the aid of any kind of false substances.
Well, that's an absolute poppycock. People have been relying on wine and beer and whiskey to be able to bear each other's company after the first 3 years of marriage. Since time immemorial.
To even meet them in the first place, I would argue as well.
You meet them in the first place, but the idea...
You're just bitter because it will arrive too late for you.
The idea... No, I'm not bitter. I'm the very opposite. I'm the very opposite. I am so deliriously happy about the fact that I finally got married when I was 56. Love for me is like diabetes. It's late onset. But I'm there and I love it. And the struggle to keep that going... Not the struggle, the effort, the compassion, the joy that you put into keeping a relationship going.
People use
I'm Team Simon. You're clearly happy, and the two of us are struggling with the cynicism.
People have always used a lot of artificial constructs before they give up on the relationship altogether. And if they've developed drugs which actually work, rather than all the mad flailing around that people do with expensive city breaks and having a third child, what do you think, Steve?
Well, I'm kind of somewhere in between the two of you, both sort of literally and also where you stand on this. My thoughts are that, yes, I wouldn't look to try to rescue relationships with medicine, but the reality of it is it makes up for a serious lack in dopamine and oxytocin that comes during a relationship going badly. And you know what? That is a major triggering factor in depression and mental health issues. And if someone's relationship breakdown is causing them a huge amount of upset, that the idea that that's just what happens with love and you have to stick it, you could say that about any mental health issue. And as far as I'm concerned, the research happening could genuinely save lives. And so as far as I'm concerned...
It's quite interesting. There's a lot of research coming out now that psychedelic drugs are definitely helpful in terms of dealing with depression and all kinds of nuanced versions of mental illness. But there are all sorts of psilocybin and the rest of it. But the MDMA usage is more intriguing in a sense because it's just almost cheap. I mean, it's free virtually to manufacture at scale and to control, whereas the other one... So
Let me quote her.
Go on.
Or to increase the possibility that you will stay in love when it's getting a little bit tricky. I absolutely agree with you. I have depression, I take antidepressants, couldn't live without them, fantastic. I'm absolutely with you on that. But the idea that this somehow can maintain a relationship feels to me to be an absolute mirage.
Well, all antidepressants do is enable you to maintain a relationship with yourself.
You have to do work with them,
That was
Simon.
Confucius who said
you
that.
Have to do work.
I thought I'd just float it past
Well, it's sticking a third grave now, isn't it?
You have to work with them.
Times once more. Here's two words you don't hear grouped together very often. Erotic bins. I don't know, it's in the autocue. I say that all the time.
I imagine the episode of Blankety Black where erotic came up and the second word was bins. I don't think they'd expect to be going home with the bonus prize at that point.
We have a video, apparently.
Look, it's as ever, you look to Scandinavia for left field social sort of exploits to try and improve society. And once again, they've come up with theirs, especially throw a little bit of sex in there. These are bins and they are erotic. And how does that work? Well, it basically, every time you deposit a little piece of rubbish in it, it makes a pleasured female voice. Apparently now... Yes, absolutely. It'll say, oh, thank you, in a Swedish voice with accent.
And that's no longer enough. You neck a load of MDMA. Next time you...
And then you end up married to the bin. Can I just ask you, did Big Sweden, are there any gay bins? I mean, is there an erotic male voice that you get in order to entice you to throw boys' rubbish away?
Was the point I was going to make, actually. It almost seems to be exclusively female. They have said that it is a well-known celebrity, and of course it is a gimmick, but it's a gimmick to try and help with the hiding process. Sweden's always done this, by the way. They trained crows to pick up cigarette butts.
I was going to say, we did that story. That was only about 4 months ago, and we did that story on here. And the corvid apparently has the intelligence of a 7-year-old. It's as good as having chimney sweep boys. It's the sort of thing that the Earl of Shaftesbury
Well, I imagine in which case
against.
it's that age, but picks up the cigarette butt, then smokes it.
Simon, what chance are us getting our 7-year-olds to ever pick up cigarette butts?
Well, no, mine have outgrown that already, I'm afraid. Friday's Mirror next, whatever the opposite of a joyride is. This must be pretty close, Simon.
This is, headline is, woman wins 4.1 million car insurance payout after catching SDT in partner's Hyundai. Quite why that it's the Hyundai makes one...
They do emphasise that in the story. I think it's unkind, isn't it?
It is unkind.
Car.
Basically what happened was, she was in a relationship with this guy. They had sex in the back of the car. It turned out he had HPV, which is I looked it up on the NHS.
Some sort of pillow.
That's right. Yeah. So I looked it up on the NHS site, and the NHS site says it's a common group of viruses. They don't cause problems for most people, but they can cause genital warts or cancer. And you go, I'm sorry, I really don't think those two things belong in the same sentence. No. I mean, genital warts you can have removed. Cancer will kill you. You know, it's one of those things where it's not getting a parking, you know.
So she got a quite serious disease from this chap, and it was covered by the car insurance?
It was covered by the car insurance, as it would do if she'd shut her hand in the car door or shut his in the car door or whatever. All of that would have been covered. This is, and I thought...
If he'd accidentally touched the cigarette lighter.
Not only did it get covered, they then appealed, the insurance people did, and the higher court confirmed her judgment.
So that's
what we don't know, of course...
4.1 million.
Yeah, well, that's what we don't know, is why it's that amount of money. We assume she's living with a highly...
Maybe she's got the warts and the cancer.
She probably got the warts and the cancer.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say the subject of this next article doesn't have a child, a PhD in child psychology. This is from the Metro, Stephen.
Oh, OK, then. I don't like to look down to refer, but here we go. Antonella Gambotto-Burke. She has come to the conclusion, through reasons that she believes to be sort of plainly obvious, though it's escaped child psychologists and people over the many decades, that bottle-fed babies are more likely to have a rubber fetish, a.k.a.
It's a fairly linear kind of calculation she's made here, right?
The linear calculation has involved a starting point and end point and absolutely no information in between. But realistically, if you've been placed a rubber teat in your mouth because you were not breastfed, then you will then carry that through to later life and have much more higher prevalence of a rubber fetish. And you can understand the thinking behind it, except without any empirical evidence or proof.
And a fetish for going if when you get an opportunity, you know.
There is an element of that. The woman
because that is incredibly satisfying. You must have done that with the feed bottle. No, with the rubber nipple on the. I mean, you mustn't do it before you get it in a baby's mouth.
I think you're on your own here.
You never.
You're on your own.
You won't be. Of course, you won't have been involved.
I've looked after babies. I've bottle-fed babies.
Have you?
What I do love about this, though, is this is what dented her credibility for me. Her quote is, people feel comforted by rubber. I know I do.
Yeah.
No, I don't feel in the least bit comforted by rubber.
It does look like one long explanation as to why she has a rubber fetish.
What I'm trying to get at here, she's branded as a feminist and she's like spoken about as a feminist, but I don't actually. I mean, I don't. Not that I'm kind of trying to redefine feminism, but she seems to be quite conservative, almost reactionary. She's saying that women there shouldn't be formula feeding. Maybe she's trying to position that as something the patriarchy has made women do in order to get them working for the man or something. But
there is an argument of that. I mean, there are many sort of social drives in life that border on a sort of religious fanaticism, and sadly I feel breastfeeding is one of them.
Yeah. Well, I think we need a palate cleanser after that one, so here's something about Anthropology from Friday's Guardian. Simon, I like this one.
It's interesting. Actually, this is an interesting story. 65,000-year-old, quote, Swiss Army knife, that's just a silly thing, proves ancient human beings shared knowledge. What this is about they've discovered this tool, this knife, and what is interesting about it is they've discovered it, identical it, in a number of different places.
It's a sort of a flint type of a thing.
Yes, it's a flint type of thing. But the point of that is that is evidence, they believe, that there is therefore communication between different parts of southern Africa, which implies that there are social networks. The extrapolation of that is that this is a discovery from just before the great Exodus, which is where we all come from,
out of
course,
Africa,
and where the Neanderthals stayed and whatever. So one of the arguments is that one of the reasons the humans that we are survived that great exodus was their social networks and their ability to communicate with each other. And I tell you what it reminded me of was the famous, it's a myth really, but do you remember this? It's called the 100th monkey myth.
Yeah.
The idea that monkeys, Japanese monkeys...
We spoke about it only last night.
Oh.
Yeah.
You mean on the...
Rupert Sheldrake, the chap who studied the idea that, yes, there's this...
I mean, it's much debunked, and my favourite debunking of it was, it turns out in the colony where it was supposed to happen, there only were 56 monkeys. but I do love this idea of social networks and the idea that that's one of the reasons we survived.
Should have been here last week, we had 100 in.
Mail again, this might be the last story of the night. This article is about the largest ever predator to roam the UK. Not Jimmy Savile.
The wrong sort of predator.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great to finish off headliners with something that my 8 and 9-year-old will go mad for.
Fantastic.
It's dinosaur news, and genuinely exciting news that they probably have discovered the largest dinosaur to have roamed Europe in the Isle of Wight of all places.
Amazing. There it is. Look at the size of that
two-legged Spinosaur, artist impression, not photo from actual time. 32 foot long, the size of a London bus.
That's not an appropriate comparison in this situation.
It is. I'm genuinely upset they didn't put a London bus on the picture next to it. It lived 125 million years ago, would have weighed several tonnes. But they're
fantastic, the idea of that roaming the Isle of Wight long before the first tea shops opened.
Well, that was the thing, and I read Dinosaur on the Isle of Wight. I just thought it was a very old person on the Isle of Wight. But what I love about this thing is it can swim.
Fantastic.
Well, yes, Spinosaurs, that was their thing.
That is all we have time for. Thank you so much to my guest, Summer Fanshawe, Stephen Grant. You've been fantastic company. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me at home. Tomorrow evening, I think it's Mark Dolan. Certainly not me. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us tonight. See you soon. Take care. Bye.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.